And coming up on this week's show, the Railways Bill is here, but what will it mean and how will it be delivered? What happened when a Pendolino derailed at Shap last week on the Westmoreland Fells? And Transport for Greater Manchester announces amazing ticket reforms. But where's the catch? Welcome to Green Signals from me, Nigel Harris, and...
from me, Richard Bowker.
First up, Richard, dive straight in, lots to talk about. A bit more of a look at the Railways Bill, which was the really big news last week. Pitched by government as a generational change, there is no doubt that some things will change, and dramatically too. But will these changes all be for the good? Or do we risk being conned by fancy rhetoric and political window dressing? Richard, you've been burning the midnight oil, taking a good look at what's being proposed. What's your verdict?
Window dressing, indeed, an interesting notion. Look, there are a number of documents you've got to get your head round with this. As we discussed on our show last week, there's a bill. There are some explanatory notes to the bill, which the government are very careful to point out. Do not change the bill. Right? They're not part of it. There's a very important document called A Railway Fit for the Future, the government's response, which goes by the snappy title CONRES, Consultation Response, I'm told. And that's a very detailed document. And then there's a thing called the Accessibility Roadmap. So you kind of got to read them all. But really important, we'll come on to this, Nigel, it is the bill that fundamentally matters, because this is the bill that will become an act, and it is the act that is law.
Frames the law.
It is the law, right? So that is really important point. There's this thing called the consultation response. It is worth a read. Ignore the first 25 pages. It's basically sort of a PR.
Window dressing, PR. Might one say?
Well, that's almost being too polite for it, really. But one thing that is worth mentioning, there were 2,320 responses to the government's consultation in February last year. You think, oh, that's an awful lot. 1,480 were from a single campaign group called Bring Back British Rail.
Really?
And they sent their members a template response. It was almost like, this is what you're supposed to think and send this in, is what I guess that means. Very sensibly, the Department for Transport have basically dealt with Bring Back British Rail's responses in a block, and then everything else in the document doesn't include their response, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense, actually.
Yeah, so that's actually quite a smart thing to do. But it does mean that the number of people who actually responded is relatively small, although, of course, a single organisation might be a massive player in the industry, and that would be one response. So, okay,
exactly so.
So, what does the bill say? Excuse me. Well, it establishes Great British Railways with a licence, and that sets up what's called the body corporate to be the directing mind for the railway. Now, interestingly, it's created out of Network Rail Infrastructure Limited. That doesn't mean that Network Rail have won, or they're any more important.
That's just a convenience, isn't it? For structural
it is a convenience.
Yeah,
absolutely.
To save them setting up a new body?
To save them that, and then they'd have to cheaply transfer. Yeah. What is it? 40,000 people.
Yeah,
they'd have the mother of all asset transfer schemes.
So a good thing.
So yeah, it would just just sensible, practical stuff, really. GBR will have one shareholder. That will be the Secretary of State, and they'll be effectively what we call a non-departmental public body. So they're not civil servants. They are kind of arm's length. But it's quite clear that whereas in the current railways model, where the regulator sets the license, approves the business plan, sets track access charges, and so on, in the future it will be the Secretary of State that does that. And if you kind of take away one message from this Railways Bill, it's that the 93 Act, which fragmented stuff and created an independent economic regulator, that has all pivoted to the Secretary of State and being responsible for setting those parameters. So the license will be issued by the Secretary.
So regulate a lot less important then.
Well, very different. But you could say that, right? And we'll come on to where that becomes an issue on one particular issue. But I still think there's the potential for this to work because, there is clearly and intent that it will be an arm's length body. But whereas everything I've read talks about the duties, the functions of GBR, so what it's got to do, its duties, who it's got to talk to and what it's got to take into account in doing those things. It's full of all of that. But what it's not clear on is how it will do it. So much of what comes next will be down to that design and also who the people, the leadership team are going to be running it. That is going to be absolutely critical. So what are a couple of the other really big points? And bear in mind, you and I have talked about this a little bit, sort of, I suppose, off camera, if you like. And I think we are going to have to do a special show in detail about this, and maybe not just one, actually.
Well, how about a sort of bill watch, Richard? Because this is going to keep coming up, isn't it? You could almost
bill watch, like spring watch without the animals.
Well, yes, or different kind of animals, maybe.
Oh, very good.
But sort of a bill watch slot that's not always there in a different length, but when there's something relevant, we can say, right, here we are, bill watch, Richard, go.
I think that's a great idea because, of course, this will go through Parliament. It's not even had its second reading yet. It's got to go through committee stage. It's got to go to the Lords. It's got to come back to the Commons, and it will be scrutinised, and there'll be lots of comments. So actually, that's a really good idea.
And with our weekly frequency, nobody else can do it like we can.
That is certainly true. What are some of the things that bill scrutiny committee and the parliamentarians will be looking at? They'll be looking at the provisions. It talks about a long-term strategy, right? Now, quite a lot of people have talked about how long. It's the consultation response, so not the bill, the consultation response says the long-term rail strategy will set out clear strategic objectives, high-level outcomes to provide certainty to industry and unlock innovation and efficiencies. Must stand true over 30 years. That's an interesting comment. Doesn't mean it's going to be a 30-year strategy, but it's got to have the things in that would work for a long period of time. So that's quite interesting. It is the role of the regulator that changes so much, though. And when it frames all of the duties and functions of GBR, it is, the change there is absolutely pivotal.
Okay.
We will come back to it, a specific example of why it's so important. The bill sets out how GBR is to create its business plans and its funding. Really important. The Secretary of State decides on the business plan and has to sign that off. And I have a question. I mean, not for you necessarily, Nigel, but I suppose
I was panicking for a moment.
No, it's okay. But just like a little question mark over my head going, on the business plan, I've been here before when you had a large organization with some divisions that you were a bit nervous about, you actually did micromanage their business plan. What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? Other divisions, you could be a little bit more empowering of because you kind of trusted them, really. Which of those will the Department for Transport and the Secretary of State apply? Is it going to be how many toilet rolls are you buying for Gravesend Station? Or is it going to be, big picture stuff in terms of signing off the business plan? That is key. In terms of funding, not a huge amount changes at one sense. The infrastructure bit that we've come to know and love, the control periods, will survive as a 5-year thing. It's going to be called a periodic review. Got to have a new label, haven't you? Otherwise, you haven't changed it. But it's the same thing. So it will set out the funding for infrastructure, operations, maintenance, and renewals.
And will that be binding as it has been in the past?
Yeah, although there is the ability for, if there is a material change, for the Secretary of State to say there's been a material change. I suspect that feels to me like a bit of a Treasury sort of back, trapdoor if they need to. And it doesn't include the funding for passenger services. That is not captured by that 5-year commitment.
But couldn't they always do that in the past anyway, open up a periodic review if circumstances change? And that was a periodic review, which confuses it, doesn't it?
It was actually an interim review. So they could do it. They could do an interim review. I mean, Tom Windsor did one of those back in my day. And I asked him to. It was all part, and he did. But it was still run by the regulator, right? So this is again. We're pivoting back.
So they've brought in control of that interim review process from the regulator to the DfT. Well,
they frankly brought in control of the entire business planning and funding process. Yes.
Okay.
But the fact that passenger services aren't included, bit of a worry because it means that there's not the same certainty. And I wonder how easy it is to do an integrated business plan when part of your funding is fixed for 5 years and part of it is maybe not quite the same. The bill allows for that to be included in the future, passenger services. But my understanding from talking around this is the state of the economy, the state of public finances is such that they're just not prepared to commit to that at the moment. There's a lot of stuff in the bill about the role of devolved nations and devolved authorities. Wales and Scotland, I suspect, won't be entirely happy with this, because if you have to take Wales as an example, I know they wanted, with the Core Valley lines, they wanted the old provisions of the current legislation where the track access regime was, sort of separated out.
This is James Price's point.
Yeah, they wanted that to be disapplied on the Core Valley lines in the same way that it's going to be disapplied on the GBR network. That's not on the face of the bill, but there is a thing about creating a memorandum of understanding between Welsh ministers and the Secretary of State and Scottish ministers. And so it'll be very interesting to see how those develop. We can't really comment too much until we see what that MOU process is going to look like. There's loads of stuff about fares and ticketing. I'm not going to go into that in great detail now. There's a desire for reform. Doesn't mean things are going to get cheaper.
Can I ask something?
Yeah.
There's all this really important stuff which people could listen to again a bit on what we did last week, and we will be coming back to it all.
We did cover some of this,
in Bill Watch. But in a previous iteration, as an editor, I'd have been saying to somebody, look, is there a big red light flashing anywhere on any aspect of this which we really need to be watching? Is there one of those things sort of going
Yes,
on?
it's a general point, but I'll use a specific example to illustrate it. So the general point is what we said right at the beginning, Nigel, and that is read the bill, right? Don't just look at what's in the press release, in the government documents.
Because that's what they want you to think.
Well, yeah, well, indeed so. So you got to read the bill. Let me give you an example of why that's important. And it relates to access to the network. One of the biggest changes that's taken place in this entire process is that in future, it will be for Great British Railways to decide how to optimally use the capacity of the network, which we know is a fixed thing. We know it is a limited good. I think in all of this, there's been a desire to clip the wings of open access operators. We've talked about this before. The problem is that has collateral consequences. So, for instance, if I took the document, A Railway Fit for Britain's Future, which is the government's response, and we thought about freight. Let's just think about freight for a second. If you read the consultation response, it's full of commitments for freight, alongside the general duty on GBR to promote the use of rail freight. This demonstrates the government's commitment and support for the rail freight industry. How about this? Will provide long-term certainty, clarity and confidence to freight operators and investors. Powerful stuff, right? When you look elsewhere in that document, it talks about a new capacity allocation framework to make the best use. And it talks about having clarity and transparency and clear plans that everybody can be confident in. It's all going to be done right and fair and in an open manner. And then it talks about an appeals process, right? So if GBR does something and doesn't give you the path that you thought you were going to get, and you're not happy about that, you can appeal. And it actually says this in the consultation response. It says, in response, the language has been replaced to offer reassurance on the extent to which ORR can always issue remedies in a meaningful way on a case-by-case basis. So where an appeal is successful, the ORR will select appropriate remedies determined in a way, I love this language, that proportionately considers the specific appealing question. The ORR will be able to dismiss the appeal and support GBR's original decision, send the decision back for reconsideration, or substitute GBR's decision for its own. Right? So you think, marvellous, right? Absolutely great. Everybody can calm down. What does the Railways Bill
I can hear a sense of however coming.
Right. So in clause 17 of the bill, there is a section called Rail Freight Target. The Secretary of State must set and publish a target to increase the use of the railway network in Great Britain for the carriage of goods. Right, that is rail freight, okay? It's wonderful parliamentary language, but the carriage of goods is rail freight. So that's good, right? Section 18 talks about all the general duties of GBR. And it says this: GBR must exercise the functions in the manner best calculated to promote the use of the railway network in Great Britain for the carriage of goods. Now, it also lists other things it has to do, right? And it says, interestingly, balancing the requirements of all of these duties, all of these functions, as seems to them, GBR, appropriate in the circumstances. You say, hang on a minute. So it's not just an absolute requirement to promote it for goods. It's as a balance against other things. And then there's a killer point I noticed at the bottom. And it says, in its application in relation to the exercise by Great British Railways of its statutory functions, which includes promoting it for the carriage of goods, this section has effect subject to Section 63 GBR's capacity duty. Yeah, that's what I did. I thought, I'll better go and look at the capacity duty. That sounds important. It is important. It says, this section applies to Great British Railways when exercising the following functions: deciding whether to permit any person to access or use GBR infrastructure for the operation of trains other than GBR passenger services. So, ergo, freight. Great British Railways must exercise the function so as to ensure that it retains sufficient capacity over GBR infrastructure to allow for the operation of GBR passenger services and of railway passenger services that it expects it will operate, will in future be GBR passenger services, and the carrying out of work necessary to maintain and improve GBR infrastructure. What does that mean? It means GBR trains are first on the graph. That's how I read that, right? So if anybody else wants to come on the network, it's after
they've run theirs.
We've made sure we've got space for our own trains. I thought, that is interesting. It then does set out the appeal process in some detail. And I'm just going to tell you this one, because this is amazing. So you've now bid for a path on the railway.
Okay.
You didn't get it, or you didn't get what you want. And you go back to GBR and they say, yeah, but unfortunately, we've got to leave space for our own trains and the trains we might want to run in the future and maintenance, right? So you go, I don't agree with that. That's unfair. I'm going to appeal. You appeal. The appeal procedure is set out on the face of the bill, and it includes this, which I thought was absolutely remarkable. Remember that said the ORR can substitute GBR's decision.
Replace its decision with its ORR's own decision, which sounds reasonable.
Clause 68, Part 4. If the ORR quashes all or part of a decision under subsection 3B, right, it may, in addition, remit all or part of the decision to Great British Railways for reconsideration, or in English, send it back and say, have another think.
Bit like the House of Lords, then.
Or substitute its own decision for the decision in question. And I thought, marvellous. And then there's a but. But only if the quashing is on the ground that there has been an error of law, and without the error, there would have been only one decision which Great British Railways could have reached. I read that, it's a bit like a judicial review.
I'm having a WTF moment here.
Yes, and I think you should. I think that says it's it really narrows the basis upon which the ORR can actually substitute a decision. Because, like judicial review, you can't judicial review someone because you don't like their decision.
It's how it was arrived at. If due process was followed, I don't care if you don't like the decision, that's it.
Well, it's actually on two bases. It's that, so was the correct process followed? And also, is it manifest error, right? Nobody acting rationally or reasonably could have come to that decision.
So
I think that's what that says as drafted. So ORR can't just go, GBR have looked at the specific circumstances on its merits and decided that GBR made it. The ORR can't look at that and say GBR made a decision, bad decision. They can only do it, I think, if they didn't follow the process precisely, and it's almost like it's just a manifest error. That narrows this enormously. So why does all that matter, Nigel? It matters because it's what it says in this bill, and the devil's in the detail. And I just hope that parliamentarians will be really studying this carefully, because I think that is somewhat in conflict with what it said in the consultation response, but it's pretty blooming close.
So does that mean then, let's say one of the freight companies has got a brilliant proposal for fantastic freight, which ticks all the boxes, which does everything it's supposed to do. And Network Rail says no, or Network Rail, sorry, GBR, and it's appealed. If it was all done according to the book, then there's nothing really you can do if GBR still says no, because ORR can't change it.
Well, that's the fear, because of the capacity duty gives GBR the right to say, I need space for my own trains. I need space for my own trains that I haven't got yet, but might want in the future. And I need space for my own maintenance. And if they followed that process and they can demonstrate reasonably that they follow that process, then I'm not sure there's an awful lot people can do. Now, there is some good news, right? There is, since we're using freight as an example, there is a statutory duty to promote freight. That's a good thing, better than not having one. There is a growth target. Again, that's a good thing. And there is the ability in the bill for GBR to discount track access. Now, they couldn't really do that in ORR days because the track access charges were set because they had to be transparent. They had to be whatever they were. But let's say a freight company wants to run a new service from, I don't know, Felixstowe to Newcastle, right?
Wherever.
And wants to go at the East Coast Main Line. GBR might say, it's full, can't do it. Oh, right. But we can send you via, Lincoln and all that,
the joint
right?
line and all that way.
Yeah, we can send you that way. That might have cost more in the past because it's longer or whatever. Now GBR can discount that.
Right.
So that there's, I think...
It's
so
a bit further, it's a bit slower, but we'll give you a better rate.
We'll give you a better rate, right? And therefore... So that, that kind of feels quite positive. But this notion that I think we all had, which was very, very open, very transparent, everybody treated exactly the same. Yeah, when you look at the functions of GBR and the capacity duty and the appeals process, in the bill, it feels more stacked to GBR than perhaps people think. And that's an example of what we're going to have to watch.
And it goes back to your point that whoever is making those decisions needs to be empowered, knowledgeable and skillful from a railway point of view, and not making that decision from any kind of political or other viewpoint.
Yeah, but they'll still be required to exercise the functions in the Act.
Yes.
And the duties in that, right?
So we don't want to hem them in then. We do not want to hem them in with language like that you've just
described. And that's
described.
The fear. And the problem now is because that's now in the bill, it's actually harder to shift.
To change.
I think that process will have to be followed very carefully. So there you go. That's the sort of stuff that we will be looking at in Bill Watch.
So you're going back to what you said. You reckon all that terminology is there to make life difficult for open access, because all the letters we've had from ministers to the ORR over the last few months, which we've covered, have made it very clear they don't like it, and that this is there to take care of that, and that the potential impact on freight is unintentional consequence.
That is pure speculation on my part, but
it sounds reasonable to me.
I can, and this is just an opinion. We don't have any insight on this, right? It feels, I wonder whether open access has slightly overplayed its hand. It doesn't cost the public sector anything. Well, yeah, it does indirectly, doesn't it?
Okay.
And this has been, this has happened, but it's classic legislation. You fix it for one, but it actually impacts on everything. I mean, arguably that impacts on cross-border Welsh services and Scottish services as well.
They'll certainly have their say, won't they?
I don't know how that's going to get resolved, but, and I might have missed something, right? But that's how it reads to me. I think this is quite important stuff.
Oh, well, blimey, Richard. Well, on behalf of all of us, thanks for all those hours you've spent in that parliamentary language. You're certainly the right bloke to be doing that, and nobody else is doing it. So stick with green signals.
Certainly,
and we might not always be right, but we'll always have an opinion, and it will always be.
It's very true.
It will hopefully be informed, or sort of as informed as you're likely to get when you're doing it. I'm not talking about me. I can just ask the daft questions, I suppose. But I hope Olly Glover's listening then. So. Certainly one for maybe him to take up for further examination. We will be coming back to this. We have formally launched Bill Watch on the hoof. And whenever Richard spots something, or if you've got something you've spotted in the Act, do let us know. Bill, do let us know, and we'll take a look at it and see whether there's stuff we need to discuss. Is that
indeed?
Does that round it off nicely, do you think?
rounds it off beautifully. I think we should move on.
Okay, then, right. Well, the railway bill does now need to get through the House of Commons to become an Act of Parliament, and the House of Lords, of course, and thank goodness Peter Hendy is there, before it can become law. MPs for all parties will have a chance to have their say, propose amendments, and so on. One such MP will be the chap I've just mentioned, Olly Glover, the Lib Dem spokesman for transport and the MP for the Oxfordshire constituency, and I always think this sounds tremendously English, Didcot and Wantage. With serendipitous timing, Richard caught up with Olly only last week at the Didcot Railway Centre to talk railways in detail and specifically what Olly would like to see done. And boy, is it a barnstormer of a discussion. It is really good. We'll publish the full interview with Olly on Tuesday, November 18th next week. But in the meantime, here's a cracking excerpt to really whet your appetite in glorious sunshine at Didcot.
There was a great moment at the Transport Select Committee when you were when Lord Hendy was there, and he got quite cross about the notion. He said, "Oh yes, lots of people in the railway say just tell us what you want and then just leave us to get on with it." But he said, "But there's loads of public money involved. That's just not realistic." Are you concerned that what they're actually doing is finding a different way to control it?
That is a big concern. That is how this could end up. Yeah, definitely. And this is what I'd really, really say to the government. And a lot of the comms that have come out heralding a new era of Great British Railways, and some of the things that they're saying are bad about the current industry, they need to look in the mirror, because a lot of those things that they're criticising are things that they themselves decided. So there's something in the comms about, we need GBR to put an end to this terrible thing of timetables that aren't integrated and connections that aren't held. Well, who's been very tightly specifying timetables for the last 20 years? It's not private sector train operating companies. It's been the Department for Transport. There's lots of examples like that. And some I mentioned earlier about some of the decisions, very short-term decisions about scrapping rolling stock prematurely. You need to look in the mirror and realise they're the ones who've screwed a lot of this stuff up.
But they do tend to be quite.
So, Richard, that was a hell of an interview, wasn't it? I'll tell you what I really did like about him. Well, there's a number of things. The number of times I heard him say, and I'll give you an example. It wasn't political waffle. He kept sort of evidentially referencing things, and I thought every now and then he simplified a very complex subject into a few words, which I loved. And I will give you two examples, if I might. One is when you're talking about electrification. He said, look, we ought to treat main lines as main lines with regard to electrification. I thought, well, that just absolutely says it all. And his other was about HS2 when he says, look, it's just been a shambles and it's expensive and all the rest of it, but we still need it.
Yeah.
Which is not what it's certainly not what Rishi Sunak did.
No.
So well done, Olly. I really liked all that.
He was great. It's a good chunky interview as well. So yeah, looking forward to, I think people will enjoy that.
And we'll doubtless get some feedback. The YouTube comments should be good. So well done. Good interview and nice bit of sunshine on Great Western equipment as well. Nice shot of a prairie tank, I noticed. Right, let's get on to other big stories this week. First of all, we wanted to follow up on the derailment at Shap, because getting the railway reopened to traffic after just 37 hours was actually an impressive achievement, especially up there in the wilds of Shap Fell. Let's be clear what had to be done. A derailed Pendolino blocking both lines had to be moved. Track had to be repaired and reinstated, and a good old length of it as well, about 500 metres it seems. The embankment had to be stabilised where it had slipped, and of course the OLE and signalling had to be inspected and sorted where required, and everything done in pretty appalling weather conditions as well, in a very exposed and inaccessible location on the Westmoreland Fells, which I know too well. We wanted to find out what, if anything, Network Rail had done differently in this instance, because it all sorted out so fast. So we asked them, and they said, and I quote, "This incident happened on a relatively inaccessible part of the West Coast Main Line in very poor weather conditions. While this area of the railway was being maintained in line with industry standards, our investigation into the cause of the derailment is still ongoing, but our initial focus was getting passengers safely back on the move. Throughout this process, we've worked closely with the Rail Accident Investigation Branch, RAIB, and we continue to support them as they determine the details of what happened, including the cause of the derailment. We'd like to thank passengers for their patience, I think there are about 80 of them on there, while we work to reopen the line as soon as it's possible to safely do so. It don't really tell us that much, Richard, does it? It's, I mean, I know they have to wait for the investigation and all that, but however...
No, you're absolutely right. We also asked Avanti sort of similar questions. And they put a sort of the operator's perspective. It's not different, but they just put an operator's perspective on it. And they said much of the same stuff about is relatively inaccessible, appalling weather conditions. They did say, I mean, they said this, a recovery team worked overnight in atrocious weather conditions to re-rail the train.
Well done then.
Yeah, and they were able to do quite a lot of the infrastructure work whilst the train was still in situ. So they were able to work around it, which was perhaps one of the reasons why they were able to do it.
Yes, that's a material point, isn't it?
A couple of people had said on social media, well, why didn't they just open the adjacent line? I mean, it'll flip, you know, it's typical, isn't it?
It was foul.
And it was foul. So the derailed train was foul of the adjacent line, so they couldn't run anything past it. It derailed. I mean, so that's kind of fair enough, I think. It is remarkable, isn't it, that it derailed and then single bogey. And we now know, because we're recording this on Wednesday, the 12th of November in the morning, and literally we've just seen the initial RAIB, almost like flash report, if you like, that sort of says something. We do now know the train was travelling at 83 miles an hour, which is extraordinary when you think that a single bogey came off and the train stayed upright and came to a stand over half a kilometre later whilst having been derailed at 83 miles an hour. That is amazing.
With only that front carriage moved across. Absolutely
incredible. We do also know, because the RIB have said, that the drainage channel at the top of the embankment it would appear to sort of be overwhelmed. It was not able to cope with the volume of water. Now, we do not know whether that's a maintenance issue or simply, the weather in that part of the country is always wet. I understand for those sort of previous 30 days, it'd been absolutely unbelievable levels of rain. So we don't know whether it was just outside of its capacity to cope. And that will obviously be investigated. But the drainage channel is clearly an issue that caused, water runoff to be greater than ever, and it sort of destabilized the embankment and so on. So that the full investigation will be very interesting in that regard. But I still do think Network Rail and Avanti West Coast and the other operators do deserve praise for just getting the railway line back open as quickly as they do. Whatever comes out of the investigation, that of itself was an amazing testament for the men and women who clearly worked in terrible conditions to get it back open again. So
another great example of the railway with its back against the wall excelling. Might I just be permitted a very, very brief personal statement here? One, I broke down in a reporter's car on Shap Pendolino, very close to that many years ago, and in absolutely thundering rain. Yeah. And there's a very funny story of that, which I'll tell on Raw and Uncut. I'll not tell it now. But I did a TV interview for Sky in the aftermath of this accident, and in the trying to make sense of what happened to it, I was guilty of a slip of the tongue, for which I was lacerated by a couple of critics on social media. I described the front bogie as having come to rest in the 10-foot. Well, of course I know. Of course I know it's a 6 foot. But in the rough and tumble of a live interview, I am sorry for my slip of the tongue. I am not quite the ignoramus that 2 or 3 very vocal critics spoke up against, and I do know it was a 6 foot. Okay, that's it. I'm sorry. It's not always easy when you're doing these things live. And with that, shall we move on?
Indeed.
There was another big good news story this week. Transport for Greater Manchester announced that from Sunday, December the 7th, everyone who buys a ticket on the day they're travelling between 2 stations of the 96 in Greater Manchester will be offered just 2 options: anytime, off-peak. Other types of tickets will still be offered to those who book in advance. Transport for Greater Manchester say that passengers in Greater Manchester will be among the first in the country to benefit from simpler and more convenient train travel when a confusing range of fares are replaced by 2 simple options in December. Okay, fair enough. The new fares will be valid on rail services run by all operators, and all single journeys will be half the price of return trips. Overall, and this is the big news, the change will mean the average fare in Greater Manchester will fall by 5.6%. Sounds great, Richard. Who's paying?
Well, that's the key. So the 5.6%, I think the average fall there is on those buy on the day tickets, right? So it's obviously not for absolutely every fare, or at least I don't think it is. But I mean, it's obviously very good news for the passengers who are going to use those. And I would like to think the logic is that by making it easier and cheaper and more integrated, if you like, it will stimulate more travel, right?
More volume.
Yeah, and it needs to, right? Because if you don't need to be, a sort of a Nobel Prize winning economist to realize that if the average fare of something comes down, either you get more people to make up the difference, or your total yield is going to fall.
It's going to come down, yeah.
So we asked Transport for Greater Manchester, we asked them 3 questions. We said, look, you say that fares bought on the day will fall by an average of 5.6%. This will lead to a drop in yield, obviously. We weren't trying to catch them out. And therefore, total revenue. How much is that total revenue? Who is funding that? Who's paying for that? One way of paying for this, and never said second, one way of paying for this is to increase demand for tickets bought on the day. What growth in ridership have you calculated you would need from tickets bought on the day for this to be
to fill the gap?
Revenue neutral is the kind of the techie phrase. And who signed off third? Who signed off the business case? Was this Transport for Greater Manchester? Does it come directly from the mayor? And so on and so forth. Those are the questions we asked them.
All very intelligent, appropriate, on the nail questions. And what did they say?
Nothing. I mean, they didn't ignore us. They just said, we can't give you a formal line. I thought this is absolutely bizarre.
Because they didn't know. They've been told not to.
Well, I don't know, right? And that, I suppose that's the issue, really. We don't know because, I mean, I do know from talking to people around the issue involved that the objective is that it does become revenue neutral. But, it's just kind of this, it's happening more and more this now. And you see it in public sector comms. It's almost that belief, if we say nothing, they'll go away. Well, I've got some really bad news.
No.
It just makes, it actually creates the opposite, right? It's the opposite. Now, I think this is so frustrating, Nigel. I think this is a good thing to do.
Yes.
Right? It is entirely reasonable for Transport for Greater Manchester and the mayor to spend money how they deem appropriate within good governance and all the rest of it. And they've made transport a key policy objective.
But let's be transparent about it.
Good for you. But none of those questions were they're not they're not top secret.
They're not trick or unreasonable.
Or are they? I don't know.
But we've had this... Sorry.
Yeah, go on. Go on.
We've had this recently, haven't we, on 2 or 3 occasions where one of us, I know Steph said it a couple of times, has gone to public organisations and we've been told we can't say anymore. Or if you want any more, go to the DFT.
And that does happen as well.
Is it another one of those?
Well, who knows, right? Who knows? But they're not answering those questions at the moment. That's a shame. I think it quite the opposite of making it look as if they're kind of keeping on message. It just makes it all look a bit kind of shifty and weird. We're actually not. We're actually supportive. And, we don't think we're any special. We're just our media organisation. There are many others just asking questions of the media team. And when you do these initiatives like this, there are always, everybody sits there and think, what are all the difficult questions that we could be asked? What are all our lines to take? What can we say? What can we not say? And you work all that through. What you don't go is go, I'm not telling you anything, right? And that I think it reflects poorly on them. It makes it look like there's something not right when there probably isn't. And it means that you can't actually help get the credit that you probably deserve.
Or that they're making it up as they go along, or they don't know what they're doing, or. It's just not right.
Well, that remains a possibility. I don't think it is in this case.
No.
I just think it's very strange, but it's not great, and it's a lost opportunity.
It's also, unlike Andy Burnham, not to be on a platform trumpeting about it, isn't it?
Well, he has trumpeted about the initiative. But maybe just somebody doesn't want to say what it's cost him. Well,
okay.
It's here you go. Anyway, rant over, but come on, guys. You can do better.
We'll keep asking.
We will.
All right. Very seriously, Up and down the land, it was Remembrance Day on the 11th of November this week, 11th hour, the 11th day, the 11th month, when the guns fell silent in the First World War. And up and down the land, there have been services to remember those who fought in war and gave their lives or were horrifically injured, so that we may enjoy the freedoms we have today. The famous line about "we gave our today for your tomorrow." One such Remembrance Day service is the now annual Poppies to Paddington service, organised by Great Western Railway and Network Rail Western Region, which this year, in fact it's its 6th year, was attended by Her Majesty Queen Camilla, along with many distinguished guests, including from the railway family. And as well as distinguished guests, there was you and me, Richard, as we were both very privileged to be invited. I must say, what a profoundly moving occasion and act of remembrance it was as well. All very appropriate, and somehow, even with the ambience of the railway going on, albeit muted in the background, added to the impact of that. Very well done, GWR, Network Rail, and everyone did such a wonderful job. If you search YouTube for Poppies to Paddington 2025, I spotted 3 films about it, including one superb TV news report where we are visible in the background, Richard, bobbing away, nattering away. But it was great. So well done, Great Western, and I'm sure that will continue year by year.
Hope so. Wonderful.
You enjoyed it?
It was absolutely wonderful, deeply moving, tremendously well organised. And can I also just say, the finest rendition of the last post I have ever heard.
I was going to mention that to you on the occasion, saying what a weight of responsibility lies on the shoulders of a single bugler to do that in such circumstances, and it was absolutely excellent.
It's perfection.
And he does actually appear on the TV report, so it's worth having a look for
Indeed.
it. So, yesterday, Wednesday, November 12th, we published a special video of a recent trip which Richard and his son Charlie made to the Severn Valley Railway. For those who aren't familiar, the 16-mile SVR is rightly regarded as one of Britain's premier heritage railways. Wonderful countryside, exquisite stations and rolling stock, all beautifully restored and maintained. It's all very historic, yet there's also a very modern, progressive approach to developing new sources of income from new generations of customers. The whole operation is led by the wonderfully positive, terminally positive indeed, Jonathan Gus Dunster, who blends the experience of a lengthy career in the rail industry with an outlook that is actually pretty different and exciting. You can watch the video on our channel right now. We published it on YouTube and Spotify on Wednesday the 12th. But here's a little excerpt to wet your whistle, and if you're into 37s, you're gonna love it.
Bridgnorth was the centre of operations for the Severn Valley Railway from the beginning of preservation, until things logically moved to Kidderminster from the mid-1980s. And at that point, Bridgnorth became a destination. And what a destination it is. The town itself is lovely with its famous High Town and Low Town, connected by a wonderful cliff railway. But the station is a gem in its own right. One of the iconic features of it is the pub, which, despite the railway closing in 1963 and trains not starting again till 1970, remained open throughout. The railway operations at Bridgnorth are as busy today as they've ever been. And so our first item of business once arriving there is to meet Duncan Ballard, Head of Steam Engineering for the Severn Valley Railway. Duncan is going to take us on a tour of the wonderful steam shed complex. We follow him along the clearly marked designated walkway and into the sheds themselves. First stop, the boiler shop.
This feels purpose-built. When was this shop actually built?
It is purpose-built, and it was definitely, probably at the time, the first one of its type built. That was in the late 1980s, 88 to 89 it was built and completed. Overhead craneage in there, which at that stage was definitely unheard of.
Yeah.
So we used to rely on old steam cranes to move stuff. So it totally transformed all the boiler repairs that we were doing in the late 80s, and obviously then subsequently it has evolved, from the 90s onwards.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a massive game changer for this organisation.
What can you do here? Pretty much everything, or
We have, to a point, we still do everything. we've done everything. We've built new boilers here. Everything we've currently got in our boiler shop is external commercial work.
Is that right?
Yes,
Wow,
it
okay.
is. And we're proud of the work we do, and we offer the same service we do internally for external customers.
So there you go. It's a wonderful railway, and the full video. It is worth a watch. You can actually, if anybody's watched that or listened, and you're interested, Green Signals, we're actually running our own private charter train on Thursday, the 11th of December. Something like a 10:15 departure, I think, from Kidderminster. We're going to go up the full length of the line. We've got tours organised in Bridgnorth. On the way back, we've got a visit to the museum at Highley. Gus Dunster's going to do a presentation. There's a buffet organised, and you get to spend a whole day with the two of us and Steph. I mean, what is not to like? There's still some tickets available. You can purchase those using the Eventbrite link that we'll put in the description on the show. If you do need any help, just send us an email to info@greensignals.org. It is going to be great fun.
It is. I do notice that your reference in the promotion to a seasonal buffet has triggered a tsunami of jokes about my well-known hatred of sprouts on social media, and will they be involved? So I wish I'd never mentioned it in the first place. Now it keeps coming up. And now it's time to thank everyone who supports us. First of all, our thanks to RIA, the Railway Industry Association, who are our first programme supporter. And to Rail Business Daily, our first media supporter. Thanks, guys. Your support, as ever, is hugely appreciated. Then, a big thank you to everyone who has left us a super thanks on YouTube over the last 2 weeks. We couldn't do this last week because they had the live show at the RIA conference. So here goes. Deep breath. It's thanks to David Hallett, Andrew Shenton, Alan Kirkman, John Kirkman, Caroline Cleveley, Bob Walsh, Nigel Mapston, Chris Exley, Michael Seagrave, John Stokes, Alistair Rutledge, John W., The Independent Brigline Rail Group, Richard R., Jeff Simmons, Pete Driver, Phil Craig, Trevor Stone, Maxstar 2010, and Peter Curtis. We really do appreciate you all leaving us these super thanks, which enables us to do what we do. So thank you very much indeed from all three of us.
Indeed. And thanks also to our new gold and silver members, who are Don Gatehouse, who upgraded to silver, and Wheelie Big Bike Trip, who upgraded to gold. You can see all our supporters, all our members, to whom we're very grateful, in the end credits of the show. If you are a gold or silver member, do drop us an email to info@greensignals.org with your postal address so that we can send you some goodies. I've got an absolute stack of mugs to get out in the next week or so, Nigel. So do keep sending us do send us your postal address so we can get that stuff to you.
So you've got a big date with your kitchen table on Sunday then, have you?
Very big date over the weekend. Very. Yeah.
And now it's time for this week's Railway News Roundup. Drivers' Union ASLEF has announced that Dave Calf will take over as General Secretary of the union when Mick Whelan steps down soon after 14 years in that role. ASLEF has 22,667 active members and another 2,948 in their retired members section. So it was a bit intriguing that the turnout for the election for Dave Calf was actually as low as 33.4%, but there you go. We, of course, wish Mr. Calf all the best in his new role and hope we'll meet him soon. And also our old friend Mick Whelan in his retirement. We wish you all the best, Mick. Thanks for your support for Green Signals. We've enjoyed your interviews with us, and very best wishes from all three of us for the future.
Indeed. I don't think we've ever had in this country a general election with as low a turnout as that, but there you go. No. Thanks to Jim Millington for alerting us to this one. And it is a union-related story, I guess. Strikes have been averted on London Underground thanks to a deal struck between TfL and the RMT. The BBC reported that the deal consists of a 3.4% pay increase effective from 1st of April 25, with a guaranteed rise of 3% in year 2 and 2.5% in year 3. Fatigue-friendly rosters, I'm not 100% sure I know what those are, but they're obviously a thing. Further discussions on staff travel and a consistent Boxing Day payment of £400. Now, after 5 days of tube strikes, they did badly disrupt London in September. This deal does lift the union's threat of more industrial action. Although I thought it was interesting that Eddie Dempsey, who's the General Secretary of the RMT, said, I quote, "This deal is a clear demonstration of the effectiveness of strike action and strong negotiation by our members." I mean, I do think that's sort of slightly dated language, but there you go. That's just an opinion. TfL said no changes have been proposed to working hours as part of this pay offer, so it does sound a little bit like a no strings attached deal there, Nigel. So, but nonetheless, I mean, at least the disruption's avoided, but at what cost, of course.
Well, that's right. Some good news here, and thanks to Dominic Ryan for this one. The Waterloo to Exeter line is to be returned to its hourly service following months of disruption with dried-out clay embankments, I seem to recall. Tom Desmond, Network Rail's Wessex Route Operations Director, speaking on behalf of South Western Railway and Network Rail, said, "We can confirm that we are set to restore the full timetable on the West of England line on November the 29th. We know just how important this line is to its local communities, with our customers using services to reach their places of work or local schools and colleges. We have closely monitored ground conditions and are now able to start track repairs. Once those repairs are complete, trains will be able to run at full line speeds, bringing the full timetable back into operation."
It's great. You just wonder, though, if we have another summer like we had this year, but next year,
it's going to
do
dry.
we? Yeah,
Going to
do
dry
we
out
go through
again,
the
isn't it?
cycle
Yeah.
again? Yeah, quite.
I would think it is.
That has to be the worry. Now, here's an interesting story from Ireland, Nigel, and thanks to David Redroll for this one. Apparently, the Athenry to Claremorris Railway is to be reopened to passenger services. Now, it's still marked on the rail atlases, because I had a look, as a kind of freight line. But actually, I think the last freight train ran on it as long ago as 2000, so quite some time ago. Now, according to Galway Bay FM, never thought I'd name
What
check
a
them,
great radio station that is.
but according to Galway Bay FM, at a meeting of the Western Intercounty Railway Committee in Galway, the Minister of State for Transport, Sean Canny, also confirmed the project will be included in the National Development Plan and gave a commitment that once the Athenry to Claremorris phase starts, the attention will then turn to phase 3, which is linking Claremorris to Collooney. Now, why is all this interesting? Well, it is because I did a little bit of research. And Athenry is a community of just over 4,500 people. Claremorris, a community of just under 4,000, right?
Okay.
The distance between the two, this is no short little branch line. It's 33 miles, apparently, by rail. Now, put that in context. Galashield's population is just under 14,000, right? So much bigger.
2.5 times. Yeah.
Howick, coincidentally, is also about 14,000, maybe slightly bigger. And the distance between them is just 17 miles or thereabouts. It's a tricky 17 miles for reasons that railway people will know, but nonetheless, it's half the distance. So I know the state of the railway alignment of the two is probably very different. I thought it was quite fascinating that Ireland is reopening a railway line that long between two relatively small centres, because there's not a lot in between.
With potential for extension.
With potential for extension. It's kind of reconnects. I mean, the line is already there at Claremorris, but it goes somewhere else. Whereas, Borders Railway, I imagine if I was a Borders Railway campaigner, I'd look at that Irish one and go, well, if they can do it for that, So I thought that was quite interesting, really. I'm not making a case either way, right? It was just an observation, but very interesting development in Ireland. They are being pretty progressive, it has to be said.
I don't know whether it's still the case, but I'm pretty sure, I'm sure I'll get corrected if I'm wrong on this, that closures in Ireland, they tended to just leave the railway rather than lift it. And describe it as mothballed in case they needed to come back to it. And that
I think they converted. I think this one is technically considered a siding. There's a jolly big siding, But because
there's some railways that once upon a time did nothing all year, and just once a year they were alive with sugar beet, I think, and then slept again for the rest of the year. Very different approach in Ireland. It's interesting. Maybe we should have a look at it sometime. A jolly over the water. Okay, thanks to Roddy Jenkins and Terry Sharp. Now, it was the end of an era at Manea between March and Ely on November the 1st when the last semaphore signals were dismantled and replaced by colour lights. According to Network Rail, they were the last semaphores on the Ely to Peterborough line, but according to the BBC, Network Rail said they were that they were not completely sure they were the last on the East Anglia system. This is Network Rail. You think they'd know, wouldn't you? What do we know? Still, maybe I should go and look. It's not that far away. Still, the end of an era, although there are, of course, still semaphores elsewhere on the network, such as Worcester, Shrewsbury, and on the Settle in Carlisle and doubtless elsewhere. And that is the news roundup for this week. If you'd like to send us any snippets of news, big stories, little stories, local, national, whatever, you can email us at news@greensignals.org. We can't promise to read them all, but if we read yours, we'll name check you.
Indeed, which means it's now time to do the quiz, which we didn't do last week because we had the live show and there were cries of outrage. Somebody said, "This is outrageous."
Was that a first? Is that the first show we've never done a quiz on? I think it was.
Yeah, I think so. I think it probably is. Anyway, so we do need to deal with the question that we'd asked the previous week, which was from listener Neil Bennett. And it was, if Hazel, Vera, Mona, Audrey and Gwen were at a party together, who would be missing and why? The answer is Doris would be missing, right? The six together are the names of the first class kitchen cars of the Brighton Belle. So there you go. And the winner, randomly chosen from all the correct answers, it was hugely popular, this question. It's probably one of our most popular ever. Anyway, the winner was Sam Brown. So well done, Sam. If you send us an email to quiz@greensignals.org, we will get your mug to you. And so to this week's quiz question, should I try that again? Honestly, easy for you to say, Nigel. Anyway. So to this week's quiz question.
There you go.
That.
You managed
also, I did get there in the end. Also from a listener, this time, Vince Chadwick. I really like this one.
Thanks, Vince.
Indeed. What is unique about Merchant Navy class steam locomotive number 35006? Right? There you go. What is unique about it? Don't say anything, Nigel. Right?
I'm not going to.
Look, well, no, I could see something flashing across your eyes. But anyway, just kind of, just look quizzical. That's fine.
I'll tell you what was flashing across my eyes when you do the answer next week, because it's the possible answer suggested it, but that's all.
Well, there you go. So don't give anything away.
I'm not going to give anything
seriously.
Away.
Anyway, so what is unique about Merchant Navy class steam locomotive number 35006? If you think you know, answers, please, to quiz@greensignals.org by midday on Saturday, November 15th. We'll put all the correct answers in a hat, select a winner at random to receive one of our very special Green Signals quiz winners mugs.
Eventually, by the sound of it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Honestly, appreciate the support. Yeah. Right, move on.
Absolutely. Okay, here we go. Here's a really positive story to end on, Richard. GB Railfreight has announced that its new fleet of Class 99 bimodal locomotives has received authorisation for placing into service, APIS, from the UK's Office of Rail and Road, ORR. This approval confirms that the Class 99 meets all essential requirements for safety, accessibility, environmental standards and technical compatibility. The APIS milestone is the next milestone for the Class 99s as they prepare to enter service. Having only arrived in the UK in May, they were formally launched at Peterborough in July. I was there. And since then have been put through all their paces across the routes and regions. Developed in partnership with Stadler and Beacon Rail, the £150 million investment marks a significant step forward in modernising Britain's rail freight infrastructure. The Class 99's first revenue-generating service is expected to take place in early 2026. That's a wonderfully short timescale, isn't it, Richard? Especially when you compare it with the years it can take to get new passenger trains into service. Doesn't seem 5 minutes since you were invited to have an exclusive look at the locomotive in Leicester at the end of June, and your excellent video, I noticed, has gone past 250,000 views on YouTube.
It has been so fast. I remember asking Bob Tiller, who's the engineer, who very kindly showed me around and was the driving force behind the project. And I said, when are you going to start tests? And he was like, July. And I said, what, like this July? And it was brilliant. Yeah, so well done then. It's really good.
going to be great to see him out and about across the network, isn't it? You know, well done, GB. And sadly, that's all we've got time for this week. Thanks so much for watching and listening. Excuse me. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up, leave a comment, or if you haven't already, please subscribe to the YouTube channel, which does help us a very great deal. It doesn't cost anything, just click the button. And if you really want to support us, find out about membership on YouTube or Patreon, and you'll be able to come on future members' trips to Severn Valley and everywhere else. But most importantly, join us again next week for this show, which will always be free. So until then, it's goodbye from me, and
It's goodbye from me.
have a fantastic week.